Today, I'm going to tell you about how a single email destroyed my 5-year marriage and revealed that the man I slept beside every night was a complete stranger. The notification sound echoed through my kitchen on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. A gentle ping that would forever divide my life into before and after. The subject line alone made my blood run cold. Congratulations to Richard Wilson, Employee of the Year. Congratulations to your husband, Richard Wilson, for his outstanding achievements and dedication that earned him our Employee of the Year award. The ceremony will be held next Friday at 7 p.m. 8 months. He'd supposedly left that company 8 months ago. My MacBook slipped from my trembling fingers and clattered onto the kitchen counter, the sound echoing through our empty house like a gunshot. The coffee I'd been sipping surged back up my throat, bitter and burning. I barely made it to the sink before the violent heaving began. Richard had left for his new job at 7:30 this morning, kissing me goodbye with the same lips that had been constructing elaborate lies for the better part of a year. The same lips that whispered about his terrible new boss and stressful client meetings at a company that, according to this email, he'd never actually joined. My knees gave out. I slid down against the refrigerator, our honeymoon magnets digging into my back. The cold tile against my legs was the only thing convincing me this wasn't some twisted nightmare. Our wedding photo stared down from the wall, his sincere eyes, the gentle hand on my waist, his perfectly straight tie I'd adjusted moments before we said our vows. 5 years of marriage crystallized into a mosaic of questions. What else wasn't real? I picked up my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and pulled up his location. The blue dot pulsed calmly at his office, his supposed new office, 15 miles away. The same office I'd driven him to several times. The building I'd waited outside of to surprise him for lunch. The place where the receptionist had looked confused when I'd asked for Richard Wilson. The receptionist whose confusion I'd dismissed as simple incompetence. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. As I began digging into my husband's secret life, I discovered something that made this email seem harmless by comparison. My thumb hovered over his contact. One call could shatter everything, bring this house of cards tumbling down around us both. But what would you do if you discovered your partner was living a completely different life? Richard and I met 6 years ago at my best friend Ellie's wedding. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd filled in last minute when one of the groomsmen caught food poisoning. I wasn't supposed to be alone, but my boyfriend of 3 years had broken up with me just 2 weeks before. Sometimes the universe conspires to bring the right people together, Richard had said when he asked me to dance. I still remember how safe his hands felt on mine, how his eyes never wandered to other women, how he remembered every detail I shared about myself. "You're watching the caterers," he noticed halfway through the reception. "You have that look." "What look?" I asked. "The one that says you're analyzing everything. You're wondering why they chose that plating, aren't you?" He was right. I'd spent 10 years in hospitality management before transitioning to event planning. Richard seemed to read me like a book from the very first day. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 3 months of dating, another 3 of living together, and by our 1-year anniversary, he was down on one knee on the same dance floor where we'd met. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he'd said. Our wedding was small but perfect. 50 guests, a converted barn venue, string lights and wildflowers. Richard handled the honeymoon plans as a surprise. 2 weeks in Greece, where he'd apparently vacationed as a child. He spoke with such vivid detail about the islands, the family trips, the little restaurant in Santorini where an old woman made the best baklava in the world. We spent hours wandering the streets looking for it. We never found it. Should that have been my first clue? After our honeymoon, we settled into comfortable domesticity. Richard worked as a marketing director at Bergman Media while I built my event planning business. We bought our house 3 years ago, a charming colonial with a wraparound porch and a kitchen I'd fallen in love with. We talked about having children soon, but agreed to wait until my business was more established. 8 months ago, Richard came home beaming. "I got an offer from Crawford and Mitchell," he announced. "Better pay, better benefits, and a VP position. I'd be crazy not to take it." I was so proud. We celebrated with champagne and talked about what we'd do with the extra income. Maybe we could finally start trying for that baby. Maybe I could cut back on weekend events. So many plans based on a job that apparently never existed. The signs were there, but so well disguised. The late nights catching up on new projects, the networking events I was too busy to attend. The sudden insistence on separate bank accounts because his new company had complicated direct deposit requirements. And there was that strange phone call 6 months ago, a woman asking for Richard, saying she was from Bergman Media HR. When I mentioned he'd left the company, she apologized for the confusion and hung up. I'd told Richard about it that night. Probably just a paperwork mix-up, he'd said. They're disorganized like that, one of the reasons I left. I believed him. I believed everything. But now, staring at this email, I had to wonder, if he never left Bergman Media, where had he been going every day? Who had he been talking to on all those work calls? And most importantly, why maintain such an elaborate lie? I sat on our kitchen floor for what felt like hours, the cold from the tiles seeping into my bones. When I finally stood, something had changed inside me. The shock was giving way to something harder, colder. I needed answers. First, I called Bergman Media's main line, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the receptionist's cheery greeting. "Hi, I'm hoping to speak with Richard Wilson in marketing." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "One moment, please, I'll transfer you." No confusion, no hesitation, just a simple transfer. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. "Marketing, this is Diane." "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I was trying to reach Richard Wilson." "Oh, he's in a meeting right now. Can I take a message?" My throat closed up. I hung up. He was there. He'd always been there. I turned to his laptop, still open on the counter. Richard had always been careful with his passwords, but there was one he didn't know I knew. 3 months ago, I'd watched him enter it when he thought I wasn't looking. His mother's maiden name plus the year we met. The desktop appeared, organized and pristine as always. I checked his email first. There were 2 accounts, the personal Gmail we both used and a work account. The work email showed hundreds of messages from Bergman Media, project updates, meeting requests, performance reviews, including one from 2 weeks ago praising his outstanding leadership on the Thompson campaign, the very project he'd told me his new company was struggling with. My hands shook as I opened his Google Drive. Folders upon folders of Bergman Media documents, presentations with his name listed as marketing director, a salary spreadsheet showing steady employment and, my stomach lurched, a significant promotion 4 months ago. No trace of Crawford and Mitchell anywhere. I moved to his browser history. Most of it was regularly cleared. Richard had always been security conscious, but the autofill told its own story. When I typed B in the address bar, Bergman Media's employee portal appeared. Why? Why would anyone fabricate an entire career change? I checked our joint account next. The deposits from Crawford and Mitchell were really transfers from another account I didn't recognize. I logged into his personal banking using the same password pattern. The mystery account appeared, labeled simply B Savings. The transactions told a story that made my blood freeze. Regular withdrawals of $2,000 to $5,000, money being siphoned off systematically, nearly $40,000 over the past 8 months. But where was it going? I checked his phone records next. One number appeared repeatedly, daily calls, often lasting 20-30 minutes. I didn't recognize it. With trembling fingers, I copied the number into my phone. I didn't call. Instead, I opened Venmo and searched for the number. A name and profile picture appeared. Melissa Chambers. A pretty blonde woman about my age. Her profile showed a connection to Richard, multiple payments back and forth over the past year, the most recent from just 2 days ago. "Dinner and movie," the caption read. The room spun around me. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. A quick social media search revealed more. Melissa Chambers worked at Bergman Media, marketing department. Her Instagram was mostly private, but her profile picture showed her smiling in front of a sunset. The same sunset photo that Richard had sent me 6 months ago, claiming he was at a corporate retreat in Arizona. My fingers hovered over the message button. Should I confront her? Ask what was happening? No, I needed more. I returned to Richard's laptop and searched his Google Maps history. Regular visits to an address in Westwood, an upscale apartment complex 20 minutes from our home. I grabbed my keys. I needed to see for myself. The drive to Westwood was a blur. The apartment complex was sleek and modern, far nicer than anything a marketing director should afford. At the reception desk, I took a deep breath. Hi, I'm supposed to meet Melissa Chambers. I'm a friend, but I've lost her unit number. The concierge smiled. Ms. Chambers is in 512. Shall I call up? No need, I said quickly. It's a surprise. She's expecting me, just not right now. The elevator ride to the 5th floor was the longest of my life. When I reached Unit 512, I stood frozen, my hand raised to knock. From inside, I heard laughter, a man's voice, Richard's voice. And then I heard something that shattered what remained of my world. A child, a baby giggling and babbling. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I returned to my car and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My husband hadn't just been living a double life. He had another family. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps I was jumping to conclusions. Perhaps there was some rational explanation for all of this. But the voice of reason inside me had gone silent. There was no innocent explanation for a secret apartment, a hidden woman, and a baby's laughter. When I pulled into our driveway, Richard's car was already there, earlier than usual. My heart hammered against my ribs as I checked the time, 3:17 p.m. He never came home before 6. The front door opened before I could even reach for my keys. Richard stood there, his face ashen. Where have you been? He asked, his voice strained. I've been calling you. I looked at my phone, 12 missed calls. Bergman Media called, I said, my voice eerily calm. They wanted to confirm your attendance at the Employee of the Year ceremony next Friday. Richard's face, I'll never forget the way it transformed. First confusion, then shock, then something like resignation. The color drained away as if someone had pulled a plug. Let's talk inside, he said quietly. No, I couldn't bear to have this conversation in the home we'd built on lies. Tell me about Melissa Chambers. His eyes widened. For a moment he seemed ready to deny it, then his shoulders sagged. How did you find out? Does it matter? The rage I'd been suppressing erupted. 8 months, Richard. 8 months of lies about a new job that never existed, money disappearing from our accounts. And what I saw today, my voice broke. A child, Richard? You have a child with her? He flinched as if I'd struck him. She's 18 months old, he whispered. Her name is Emma. The world tilted beneath my feet. 18 months, that meant... You were with her while I was planning our anniversary party. The realization hit me like a physical blow. You were building a life with her while sleeping in our bed. It wasn't supposed to happen, Richard said, reaching for me. I recoiled from his touch. Melissa and I, it was just an office thing at first. But then she got pregnant and I couldn't just abandon my child. So you abandoned your wife instead? The words tasted like acid. You just didn't have the courage to tell me. I was trying to figure it out. His voice rose defensively. I was going to tell you, but then your father got sick and it never seemed like the right time. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Well, you failed spectacularly at that. I love you, he said desperately. I've always loved you. Don't you dare! My voice shook with fury. You don't lie to people you love. You don't steal from them. You don't father children behind their backs. It's complicated, he pleaded. If you'd just let me explain. Explain what? I was screaming now, not caring who heard. Explain how you've been living in that Westwood apartment? Explain the $40,000 you've taken from our savings? Explain how you looked me in the eyes every single day and told me lies about a job that never existed? His face crumpled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? He had no answer. Who else knows? I asked, suddenly realizing the magnitude of his deception. Does your family know? Our friends? Has everyone been laughing behind my back? No one knows, he said quickly. Only Melissa and a few people at work. I've kept the 2 lives completely separate. 2 lives, as if that made it better. Get out, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Pack whatever you need and get out of my house. It's our house, he said weakly. Not anymore. I stepped past him into the home we'd shared. You have an hour. Anything you leave behind goes in the trash. As I walked upstairs, my legs barely supporting me, Richard called after me. Can we please just talk about this? There's more you don't understand. I turned slowly on the stairs, looking down at the stranger I'd married. Like what? What else could there possibly be? His eyes met mine, filled with a desperation I'd never seen before. Melissa isn't the only one, he whispered. There are others. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of rage, grief, and disbelief. Richard left that night with 2 suitcases and his precious laptop. He tried to explain about the others. 2 more women, one in San Diego, one in Portland. Business trips that weren't for business. Birthday weekends away that were spent with other women. A web of lies so complex I couldn't comprehend how he'd kept track of them all. I changed the locks the next morning. The physical symptoms of betrayal were surprising in their intensity. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My body alternated between feverish heat and bone-deep chills. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard with Melissa, with his daughter Emma, with nameless, faceless women in different cities. I called in sick to work, unable to face clients with my world in shambles. My assistant rescheduled 2 weeks of appointments without asking questions. On the 3rd day, when I hadn't left the bedroom except to use the bathroom, my best friend Ellie practically broke down the door. Your neighbor called me, she said, surveying the wreckage of tissues, unwashed mugs, and the same pajamas I'd been wearing for days. She said Richard left with suitcases and you haven't been seen since. What happened? I told her everything. The email, the investigation, the confrontation, Melissa, Emma, the others. Her face went from shock to horror to white-hot anger. That manipulative, gaslighting bastard, she hissed when I finished. I'm going to kill him, literally murder him. Get in line, I said weakly. She forced me to shower while she changed the sheets and opened windows. The fresh air felt alien after days in stale darkness. She made me toast with peanut butter, the only food my stomach could tolerate, and sat across from me at the kitchen island. Have you called a lawyer? She asked. I shook my head. You need one, today. He's been stealing from you, lying to you, and God knows what else. You need protection. She was right. I called the lawyer my company used for contracts. He referred me to a divorce attorney who agreed to see me that afternoon. In the sterile office with its leather-bound law books and discreet box of tissues on the desk, I recounted my story again. The attorney, a stern woman in her 50s named Patricia, took notes without comment until I finished. We'll need a forensic accountant, she said finally. If he's been moving money around, there's likely more we haven't found yet. How are your finances structured? I explained about our joint account, his separate account, our investments. And is your home in both names? Yes, but I paid the down payment for my inheritance. Richard's name is on the mortgage, but I've made every payment. Patricia nodded. We'll need documentation of all of that. What about joint credit cards? My stomach dropped. I hadn't even checked those. Cancel them immediately after this meeting, she advised, and gather all financial records from the past 5 years, bank statements, investment accounts, retirement funds, everything. She slid a document across the desk. This is a temporary restraining order. It will prevent him from accessing joint assets while we sort this out. I stared at the paper. Is that really necessary? Mrs. Wilson, your husband has been systematically lying to you for at least 18 months, possibly longer. He's been diverting funds to support at least one other household. You have no idea what he's capable of when cornered. The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know Richard at all. The man I married was a carefully constructed fiction. One more thing, Patricia said, her voice softening slightly. Get tested for STDs. If he's been with multiple partners, your health could be at risk. I left her office with a folder of legal documents, a list of tasks, and a hollowness in my chest where my heart used to be. That night, Richard called. "I want to explain," he said when I answered. "There are things you need to understand." "I understand plenty," I replied. "You've been served with a restraining order. Don't contact me again except through my attorney." "A restraining order?" His voice rose in disbelief. "That's ridiculous! I've never hurt you!" I laughed bitterly. "You've been hurting me for years. I just didn't know it." "This isn't who we are," he pleaded. "We can work through this. People make mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner," I cut in. "What you did was a campaign of deception, hundreds of individual choices to lie day after day. That's not a mistake, Richard. That's who you are." I hung up and blocked his number. The next day, I went for STD testing, a humiliation I never imagined facing at 34. I sat in the clinic waiting room, surrounded by college students, wondering how my carefully planned life had disintegrated so completely. That evening, I found myself standing in our spare bedroom, the one we'd discussed converting to a nursery someday. The room Richard's daughter could have occupied if he'd been honest. The anger that surged through me was so powerful, I put my fist through the drywall before collapsing in tears. When Ellie found me there an hour later, I was still cradling my bruised hand. "I think I'm having a nervous breakdown," I whispered. She held me while I sobbed. "No," she said firmly. "You're having a perfectly normal reaction to an abnormal situation. There's a difference." That night she stayed over, sleeping beside me like we used to during college sleepovers. As we lay in the darkness, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I stared at the ceiling, considering. "I don't know if forgiveness is even relevant anymore," I said finally. The Richard I would have forgiven never existed. 2 weeks after Discovery Day, I returned to work. My first event was a corporate retreat. Ironic, given that Richard's retreats had been covers for visiting his other women. I threw myself into the details with manic precision. Every centerpiece, every schedule, every dietary restriction became a lifeline keeping me tethered to reality. My business partner, Marcus, watched me with worried eyes but asked no questions. I told him only that Richard and I were separating. The humiliating details remained private. When the event concluded successfully, Marcus handed me a glass of wine. "Whatever's happening," he said gently, "remember that you're still excellent at what you do. That hasn't changed." His words unlocked something inside me. In all the chaos, I'd forgotten that parts of my identity remained intact. Richard hadn't taken everything from me. That realization became my first real step toward healing. I found a therapist, Dr. Helen Chen, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. In her sunlit office with its comfortable chairs and box of tissues that seemed standard issue for professionals dealing with my situation, I unloaded the full story. "What you're describing," she said during our second session, "is similar to post-traumatic stress. The disbelief, the physical symptoms, the flashbacks, these are normal responses to severe betrayal trauma." "I feel crazy," I admitted. "One minute I'm functioning, the next I'm sobbing in the cereal aisle because they stocked the granola Richard liked." She nodded. "Your brain is trying to reconcile two incompatible realities, the marriage you thought you had and the truth you've discovered. That cognitive dissonance is excruciating." "Will it ever stop?" I asked. "Yes," she said simply. "Not immediately and not all at once, but gradually, with work, the pain will become manageable. Then it will become occasional. Eventually, it will be just a part of your story, not the defining feature of your life." I clung to that promise in the dark moments, and there were many. The legal process ground forward. Our assets were frozen pending investigation. The forensic accountant discovered Richard had been siphoning money since before our marriage, small amounts that gradually increased. Over 5 years, he'd diverted nearly $120,000. "Where did it all go?" I asked Patricia during a meeting. "From what we can determine, primarily to support his relationship with Melissa Chambers, the apartment, expenses for their child, gifts. There are also regular payments to accounts in San Diego and Portland that align with his other relationships." I felt physically ill. All this time, I thought we were saving for our future, for our children. Patricia's normally stern expression softened. "I've been doing this for 25 years, she said. What your husband did, the extent and duration of his deception, is extreme even in my experience. Most people aren't capable of sustaining lies at this level." Strangely, her words were comforting. This wasn't normal. I hadn't missed obvious signs. I'd been targeted by someone exceptionally skilled at deception. 4 months after Discovery Day, I joined a support group for betrayed spouses. The stories I heard there ranged from one-night stands to decades-long double lives. Some were staying to rebuild, others were leaving. All were shattered in ways the outside world couldn't comprehend. "The hardest part," said a woman named Janet during my second meeting, "is that they stole our ability to trust our own judgment. Every memory becomes questionable. Every future relationship feels like a potential trap." The group nodded in unified understanding. This was the invisible wound of betrayal, the damage to our sense of reality itself. In my 6th month of healing, I faced a new challenge. Our house, the home I'd lovingly decorated where I'd planned to raise children, had to be sold as part of the divorce settlement. Despite Patricia's efforts to keep it, the entanglement of our finances made it impossible. Packing up 5 years of marriage was like performing an autopsy on a relationship. Each item had to be examined, categorized, and either kept or discarded. Richard's possessions went into boxes for his attorney to collect. Our wedding photos went into the trash. The furniture we'd chosen together went to auction. Standing in the empty living room on my final day there, I found myself surprisingly calm. The house had become a mausoleum to a marriage that had died long before I knew it was ill. My new apartment was smaller but filled with light. I bought new furniture, pieces I chose alone, reflecting only my taste. I painted the walls colors Richard would have hated. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, something Richard's allergies had always prevented. 7 months after Discovery Day, my divorce was finalized. Richard had eventually stopped fighting and accepted a settlement that left him with far less than he'd hoped for, but more than he deserved. I refused to speak to him during the final proceedings, letting our attorneys handle all communication. That night, I invited Ellie, Marcus, and a few close friends for a divorce warming party in my new apartment. We drank champagne and ate cake with "Congratulations on your freedom" written in frosting. For the first time in months, I laughed without feeling guilty afterward. Later, when everyone had gone, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. The pain hadn't disappeared. It still ambushed me at unexpected moments, but it no longer defined my existence. I was building something new from the wreckage, something that belonged entirely to me. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since finding the email that changed everything. 1 year after Discovery Day, a date I now think of as my second birthday, I took myself to dinner at an expensive restaurant I'd always wanted to try. I wore a new dress, ordered champagne, and toasted myself quietly. "To surviving the unsurvivable," I whispered. The waiter, misunderstanding, smiled and said, "Anniversary?" I considered for a moment. "Yes," I replied, "but not the kind you're thinking of." So much had changed in that year. My business had not just survived but thrived, partly because I'd thrown myself into work with renewed focus. I'd moved again, using some of the divorce settlement to make a down payment on a small townhouse, the first property I'd ever owned independently. The healing wasn't linear. Some days still brought waves of anger or sadness, but those waves no longer threatened to drown me. Dr. Chen had helped me understand that betrayal of this magnitude changes a person permanently, not just their circumstances, but their fundamental self. The challenge wasn't to get back to normal, but to integrate the experience into a new identity. "Think of it like a broken bone that heals stronger at the fracture point," she'd explained. "The break changes the bone forever, but the healing makes it more resilient." I'd found unexpected gifts in the wreckage, a fierce independence I'd never known I possessed, deeper friendships forged in the crucible of crisis, a capacity for self-reliance that would never have developed in the safety of my marriage. 15 months after Discovery Day, I received an email from Melissa Chambers. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. "I know you have every reason to hate me," she wrote, "but I think you deserve to know the truth. Richard told me he was separated when we met. By the time I discovered he was married, I was already pregnant. I believed his promises that he was leaving you, that it was just a matter of time. I was as deceived as you were, just in different ways. I'm sorry for the pain we've caused you." I stared at her words for a long time. The woman I'd imagined as a predatory homewrecker was another victim in Richard's web of lies. I felt an unexpected kinship with her. We'd both loved and trusted the same untrustworthy man. I replied simply, "Thank you for telling me. I hope you and your daughter are finding peace." She responded with a photo of a beautiful little girl with Richard's eyes. "Emma should know her half-siblings someday," she wrote, "when you have children of your own." The message brought tears, but not of anger or jealousy. Something more complex, a grief for the children Richard and I had planned but would never have, mixed with a strange gratitude that at least one innocent child existed from the wreckage of his lies. 18 months after Discovery Day, I started dating again, tentatively, awkwardly, with the hyper-vigilance of someone who's been severely burned. The first few attempts were disasters. I saw red flags everywhere, analyzed every statement for inconsistencies, questioned motives behind the simplest gestures. "You're not ready," Ellie told me gently after I sabotaged a promising third date with an interrogation about his phone habits. She was right, I needed more time. 2 years after Discovery Day, I met David at a charity event I was coordinating. He was a widower with a quiet demeanor and kind eyes. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. Our first date, a week later, ended with a handshake and a promise to meet again. David's patience with my trust issues was endless. When I explained what I'd been through, he didn't offer platitudes or promises. Instead, he said something that struck me deeply. "I can't guarantee I'll never hurt you," he told me. "No one can promise that, but I can promise that I will never intentionally deceive you. Honesty isn't just a policy for me, it's the only way I know how to love." With David, I learned that trust isn't about certainty, it's about risk management. Some risks are worth taking, even when the potential for pain exists. 3 years after Discovery Day, I rarely think about Richard unless something specific triggers a memory. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that he's moved to another state, started a new job, presumably constructed a new fiction to present to the world. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about the destruction he caused, the lives he derailed with his deceptions. More often, I'm grateful for the hard-won wisdom his betrayal ultimately provided. If you're watching this and struggling through your own betrayal story, here's what I wish someone had told me in those early devastating days. The pain you're feeling isn't a personal failing, it's a normal response to abnormal behavior. You didn't miss obvious signs because you're stupid. You missed them because you're normal, and normal people don't anticipate elaborate deception from those they love. The healing process isn't about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving. It's about reclaiming your sense of self and your ability to trust your own perceptions. The person who betrayed you doesn't get to define your worth or determine your future. Only you have that power. And finally, the most important truth I've learned. Surviving betrayal reveals a strength you never knew you possessed, a resilience that becomes your foundation for everything that follows. Life after betrayal isn't just possible. With time, work, and the right support, it can be beautiful in ways you can't yet imagine. I know because I've lived it. My name is Emma Wilson, and this has been my story of discovery, devastation, and ultimately, renewal. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible. Leave a comment about your own experience or questions. This community has been an incredible source of support for me and many others walking this difficult path. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing. Together, we're stronger than the betrayals that tried to break us. Thank you for listening.